Okay, so today we are going to discuss these five important topics. The first topic that we will discuss is 5G network. Second topic, profound therapy. Then we will see food fortification. We will understand base erosion and profit shifting. Then we will lastly understand about leverage ratio. These are the five topics that we will look today, okay, in detail. So, what is 5G network and why it was in news? Okay, recently the Department of Telecommunication has decided to allow mobile operators to start 5G trials from June. Okay, so that's why it was in news. And what is the background? So let us learn about 5G network. Okay. So 5G is a wireless communication technology using radio waves or radio frequency energy to transmit and receive data. It is the next generation mobile network technology after 4G LTE networks. 5G technologies which will enter services gradually beginning in 2019 and advance to a full range of services by 2024. 5G connections in India are forecasted to reach 88 million by 2025, equivalent to around 7% of the total connections based in the country. Then 5G will underwrite US dollar 12.3 trillion of global economic output by 2035, with investment in the value chain expected to generate a further US dollar 3.5 billion in output and provide support to like 22 million jobs. So this is the background in which the 5G was in news. Okay, so the most important thing that we need to understand is it is a wireless communication technology that uses radio waves or radio frequency energy. Okay. What are the advantages of having 5G? So advantages is that it will give you faster, it will give rise to faster data speed. Okay. So currently the 4G networks are capable of achieving the peak download speed of 1 gigabyte per second, like 1 Gbps. With 5G, the speed could be increased up to 10 Gbps. Okay. So the thing is with 5G, the speed of the data speed will be 10 times higher than the data speed of like 4G, and it uses ultra low latency. What do we mean by ultra low latency? Latency refers to the time it takes for one device to send a packet of data to another device. Okay? Latency means it refers to the time it takes one device to send a packet of data to another device. In 4G, the latency rate is around 50 milliseconds, but 5G will reduce to about 1 millisecond. Okay, so the thing is 5G, using 5G, the latency is going to reduce. Okay, so by almost 50 times. Okay, so in 4G it is 50 milliseconds, in 5G it is going to be about 1 millisecond. Then it will give rise to a more connected world. How 5G will provide the capacity and bandwidth as per the need of the user to accommodate technologies such as Internet of Things. Thus, it will help incorporate artificial intelligence in our lives. It can also support virtual reality and augmented reality services. Okay? Then there are some additional data that have been, like some reports by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. So let us see. So as per OECD Committee on Digital Economic Policy, 5G technologies rollout will help in increasing GDP, creating employment, and digitizing the economy. In agriculture, 5G can enable improvement in entire value chain from precision farming, smart irrigation, improved soil and crop monitoring, okay, to livestock management. Okay. In manufacturing, also it is going to help. Okay, so 5G will enable use of robotics for precision manufacturing, particularly where humans cannot perform these functions safely or accurately. In the energy sector, smart grids and smart metering can be efficiently supported with the rise of renewable and storage technologies. Low latency communication will be critical to manage these grids. In healthcare, 5G can enable more effective telemedicine delivery, telecontrol of surgical robotics, and wireless monitoring of vital statistics. Okay. Then, what are the challenges that we can face like when we have 5G? A huge investment will be required. Okay, a huge investment will be required. India needs a massive of 5 lakh crore, okay, which is equivalent to 70 billion dollars, okay, investment to bring 5G. So it requires a huge investment. And this spectrum that is going to be used is going to be expensive, okay, expensive spectrum. So Indian spectrum prices are some of the highest in the world, and the allocated quality is well below the global best practices, while 40% of this spectrum is lying unsold. Okay, so this is the thing. This is the state of affairs with respect to allocation or of spectrum. Now let us see lack of uniform policy framework. Okay, in India, we do have a lack of uniform policy framework. Okay? So delays due to complex procedures across states, non-uniformity of levies, along with administrative approvals have impacted telecom service providers in rolling out optical fiber cables and telecom towers. Okay? Then local regulatory issues. So like we are also going to face local regulatory issues. Now, many of the local rules and regulations are prohibiting the rapid and cost-effective rollout of the small cell in the city centers, where 5G is initially expected to be most in demand. Then we have that scenario in the industry. According to ICRA, okay, the collective debt of telecommunication service providers stands at 4.2 lakh crore. So the thing is, this particular telecom industry is already in a huge debt. Okay, so this industry lacks the capacity, to invest more money for bringing 5G technology in India. And low optical fiber penetration. India lacks a strong backhaul to transition to 5G. Backhaul is a network that connects cell sites to a central exchange. As of now, 80% of the cell sites are connected to microwave overhaul, while under 20% sites are connected to fiber. Okay? Then high import of equipments. Import accounts for 90% of the India's telecom equipment market. Okay, so the thing is, we are importing to an extent of 90% of India's telecom market. However, due to lack of local manufacturing and research and development, Indian telecom providers have no optical option other than produce and deploy 5G technology from procure and deploy 5G technologies from foreign suppliers. Then, if we talk about security, according to the Global Cyber Security Index, okay, there is an index which is known as Global Cyber Security Index, which is released by the International Telecommunication Union, okay, ITU. Only about half of all the countries have a cyber security strategy or are in the process of developing one. The index, which was topped by Singapore at 0.925, saw India at 23rd position. Then possibility of increased digital divide. Okay, so the India like initial deployment of 5G networks in dense and urban areas could left behind rural areas due to commercial viability may lead to increased digital divide. And human exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. There can be some concerns about the steady effect of these frequencies on the health of humans as well as on animals. So these are the issues that are associated with this rollout of 5G technology. Okay? So what are the way forward for the government? Okay? So the thing is, government can go on the spectrum policy. They can, make new civil infrastructure. Okay, so government can support the 5G investment. Then favorable taxation policy can be adopted. Then government can roll out a pilot project for the initiation of 5G. Okay, so this way forward, you can read it once I share the document with you. Okay, then if you compare the 4G and 5G technology, okay, we have already discussed. So on the left side, we have the details about 4G, and on the right side, we have the details about 5G. So we will see what are the differences. When we talk about latency, in case of 4G, the latency is 50 milliseconds to 10 milliseconds. Okay? In case of 5G, the latency will be ultra low, which is less than 1 millisecond. If we talk about data traffic, okay, in case of 4G, it is 7.2 exabytes per month. In case of 5G, it is expected to have 50 exabytes per month by the year of 2021. And if you talk about peak data rates in case of 4G, it is 1 GB per second, 1 Gbps. Okay? So this is the highest data speed that the 4G can offer. In case of 5G, it can give the peak data rates or highest data speed to almost about 20 GB per second. In case of 4G, available spectrum is of 3 gigahertz. In case of 5G, the available spectrum is 30 gigahertz. Are you seeing the frequency range is varying? Okay, in case of 5G, the frequency is also very high. Okay. Then, if you talk about 4G connection density, okay, 100,000 connections per square kilometer can be there. In case of 5G, if you talk about connection density, it can be 1 million connections per square kilometer. Okay. So that's all. Now here I have included a table. In this table, like you can see some of the differences between 2G and 3G. Okay, that is given, and some steps that have been taken by the government, like Bharat Net program, National Digital Communication Policy 2018. Okay, and government has also launched a program which is titled Building an End-to-End 5G Test Bed. Okay? Then several smaller academic research and development programs around 5G themes have also been funded by the Department of Science and Technology and Ministry of Information, like MITI. Okay? So this is the thing. Now, reports of the steering committee of the high-level forum laid out three priority areas in 5G. What are the three priority areas? One is deployment, second is technology, third is manufacturing. What is deployment? An early rollout of the 5G services to maximize the value proposition of 5G as a technology. If we talk about technology, to build indigenous industrial and research and development capacity, especially for the design and intellectual property. When we talk about manufacturing, to expand the manufacturing base of 5G technologies, which includes both semiconductor fabrication and equipment assembly and testing. Okay, so these are the the report of the steering committee of the high-level forum. Okay, they have laid out three priority areas. What are those three priority areas? We discussed about deployment, about technology, about manufacturing. Okay, so this is all about 5G. Now let us move to the next topic for the day, which is food fortification. We will understand why food fortification was in news. Okay, we will understand what do we mean by food fortification. Then we will see what are the challenges associated with food fortification. We will see some way forward. Okay, and then we will also see food safety and standards authority regulations. Okay, for 2018 related to food fortification. So let us understand why it was in news. Okay, Department of Food and Public Distribution under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Okay, so what is the department? This is Department of Food and Public Distribution under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Recently approved a centrally sponsored pilot scheme on food fortification of rice and its dispersal through public distribution system. Okay, through public distribution system. So financial assistance up to 90% in case of northeastern states, hilly and island states, and up to 75% in case of rest of the states has been extended by the government of India for food fortification. Then the government of India has also advised all states and union territories, especially those states and union territories which are distributing wheat flour through public distribution system, to distribute fortified wheat through the PDS. Now let us understand what do we mean by food fortification. Food fortification is the deliberate addition of one or more micronutrients. What we are doing, we are adding one or more micronutrients to food so as to correct or prevent a deficiency and provide a health benefit. Okay? So food fortification is the deliberate addition of one or more micronutrients to food so as to correct or prevent a deficiency and provide a health benefit. Okay? This is food fortification. These nutrients may or may not have been originally present in the food before processing. Food fortification is a complementary strategy. Okay? It is a complementary strategy and not a replacement of a balanced and diversified diet to address malnutrition. So let us see about food fortification. What can food fortification do? Okay. So food fortification can improve the health of a large section of population all at once since the nutrients are added to staple foods and are widely consumed. And food fortification is a safe method of improving nutrition among people as the quantity added is very small and well regulated as per the prescribed standards. Okay. And food fortification is a socio-culturally acceptable way to deliver nutrients to people as it does not require any changes in food habits and patterns of people and does not alter the characteristics of food, that is the taste, feel and look. Okay, so it does not alter. It is very important that food fortification does not alter the characteristics of food, that is the taste, the feel and the look. Okay, then food fortification is cost effective and delivers quick results. Okay? The Copenhagen consensus estimates that every 1 rupee spent on food fortification results in 9 rupee in benefits to the economy. Okay? So this is all about food fortification. Now let us see what are the challenges associated with food fortification. Okay? So I'll be highlighting these challenges for you one after another. One of the challenges is that it is voluntary in nature. Second challenge associated with food fortification that like poor implementation by the states. Third is related to weakness of the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Okay. Then we will see lack of awareness. Okay. So let us see the challenges associated with food fortification. Okay. So it is voluntary in nature. Food fortification continues to be voluntary rather than mandatory, leading to limited efforts to fortify by state governments and private sector. Then poor implementation by states. Although some states have adopted fortification in ICDS, Integrated Child Development Services, MDMS, and PDS, but due to lack of definitive policy guidelines, budgetary constraints, technical knowledge, and logistic supports, states have not adopted fortification in a holistic manner. Then, weaknesses of the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. It lacks resources and manpower to effectively carry out its mandate. Then lack of awareness. Okay. There is a lot of misinformation and ignorance about the usage and benefit of fortified food as of now. So let us see what can be the way forward related to food fortification. One of the things is like food fortification can be implemented nationwide. Okay, then central government can extend support to the states. Okay, then awareness can be generated among the masses. Then promote food process. We can promote the food processing industry also. So let us see details about it. What are the way forward? Nationwide implementation. Can the implementation of fortification via government schemes would amount to only an increment of 1% of the total budget allocated annually. Okay. Then support to the states. Merely issuing orders and notifications from Government of India will not suffice as the state governments require hand-holding support and should be sensitized about the benefits of fortification and must be enabled to procure fortified staples in various programs. Then ensure standards. These are we are now discussing about the way forward. Okay? Ensure standards. The compliance with the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India standards with respect to macronutrients, contents, and quality must be strictly enforced. Then awareness. A mass awareness campaign about food fortification is needed to scale up demand from the consumers in the open market. Then promote food processing industry. It will go a long way in improving the nutritional value of the staple food. So these are the way forward related to food fortification. Okay. So why the need for food fortification? Why it is important? To fortify the food. So some data has been given in support of this particular argument. That why there is a need to fortify the food. Okay. So nearly 70% of the people in India consume less than half of their recommended dietary allowances allowance of micronutrients. The deficiency of micronutrients is also known as hidden hunger. Okay? So the thing is, the deficiency of micronutrients is known as hidden hunger and leads to various diseases like night blindness, goiter, anemia, and various birth defects. Then, according to the National Family and Health Survey (NFHS) score, 58.4% of children between the age from 6 to 59 months are anemic. This is like they have anemia. Okay? Then 53.1% women in the reproductive age group are anemic. Okay, so like this is as per the data published by the National Family and Health Survey 4. And 35.7% of the children under the age of 5 are underweight. And around 50 to 70% of these birth defects are preventable, caused due to deficiency of folic acids. Okay? And this is very important data that is given in this particular table. Okay? This is related to Food Safety and Standards Codification of Foods Regulation 2018. So this particular regulation has been initiated by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. So we will understand the details about this particular regulation. Okay? It has been prescribed. It has prescribed standards for fortification of various food products, such as all fortified foods must not fall below the minimum level of micronutrients. Then they have also talked about quality assurance. Okay, under this, they said that every manufacturer and packer of fortified food shall give an undertaking on quality assurance. Okay. Then, under quality assurance, standard testing of fortifications and fortified food should be carried out. Okay. And every package of fortified food shall carry name of the fortificant and the logo to indicate. Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has recently introduced plus F logo. Okay, this is plus F logo for fortified staple food products. Okay. The Food Authority shall take steps to encourage the production, manufacture, distribution, sale, and consumption of fortified foods. Okay, so these are the things associated with the Food Safety and Standards Codification of Foods Regulation 2018. These regulations have been released by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Now let us move to the third topic for the day, which is base erosion and profit shifting. Okay, we will understand about base erosion and profit shifting. Why it was in news? Because the Union Cabinet approved ratification of a multilateral convention. Okay, so the Union Cabinet has approved ratification of a multilateral convention to implement OECD's project on checking tax evasion. Okay, so Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has a project that talks about checking tax evasion. So that's why the Union Cabinet has approved that we are going to ratify the multilateral convention. Ratify means we will bring that multilateral convention in practice domestically by making a law in India. Okay, this is the thing. So let us understand about that convention first. Then we will understand about base erosion and profit shifting. It is an economic concept. Okay, it is very important concept. So let us talk about the multilateral convention. Okay. So name of the convention is this thing. So I'm just highlighting it for you in a minute. The multilateral convention to implement tax treaty related measures to prevent base erosion and profit shifting was signed in Paris in 2017. It entered into force on 1st July 2018. Then the multilateral convention is an outcome of the OECD or G20 project. It is an outcome of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development / G20 project to tackle base erosion and profit shifting. Okay. The convention will modify India's treaties in order to curb revenue loss through treaty abuse and base erosion and profit shifting strategies by ensuring that profits are taxed where substantial economic activities. Okay? What they are going to ensure by ensuring that profits are taxed where substantial economic activities generating the profit are carried out and where the value is created. Okay? So the thing is, taxation should happen wherever the substantial economic activities being carried out from where they are generating profit. Okay? Then the convention enables all signatories to meet treaty-related minimum standards to counter treaty abuse and eliminate double taxation that were already a part of the base erosion and profit shifting package. Okay? So let us understand about base erosion and profit shifting. Okay? So we will understand about base erosion and profit shifting. What it means. It refers to a tax avoidance strategy that exploit gaps and mismatches in tax rules to artificially shift profits to low or no tax locations, resulting in little or no overall corporate tax being paid. Okay. The OECD, under the authority of group of 20 countries, okay, so under the authority of group of 20 countries, has considered ways to revise tax treaties, tighten rules, and to share more government tax information under the BEPS project, and had issued action plans in 2015. Then let us see the base erosion and profit shifting project goal. What it is going to do. Okay. So the thing is base erosion and profit shifting project. What this project is going to do is written in these bullet points. Okay. So we are going to learn about it. Increase tax revenues. It is going to increase the tax revenues which were earlier lost due to base erosion and profit shifting. What do we mean by base erosion and profit shifting? Simply, let's consider, there is a company which is located in one jurisdiction. Okay, let's consider this is, there are multiple companies that are located in jurisdiction A. Jurisdiction A simply means a tax jurisdiction, maybe a country. Okay, then, so the thing is, they are generating profit from this particular country. After generating profit, they are not paying, substantial tax over here, and they are what they are doing. They are shifting the profit to another jurisdiction. What it is effectively leading to? It is effectively leading to avoiding tax. Okay, it is tax avoidance strategy where people are generating profit from one jurisdiction, but they are unwilling to pay taxes in that jurisdiction, and they are shifting the profit to another jurisdiction for their larger benefit. Okay, for the benefit of the companies, but like it is not benefiting the taxing authority in that particular jurisdiction. So that's why this base erosion and profit shifting project is being implemented. Okay. So once it is implemented, what it will do, it will increase the tax revenue which was earlier lost due to base erosion and profit shifting. Base erosion and profit shifting is of major significance for developing countries due to their heavy reliance on corporate income tax, particularly from multinational enterprises. Then the base erosion and profit shifting project would give level playing field for both domestic and global companies by allowing them to conduct businesses under similar circumstances. Tax saving from base erosion and profit shifting would give multilateral companies an edge over domestic companies who may lag the withdrawal, who may lag the wherewithal to employ such strategies. Okay? And it will also prevent double taxation. These are the things associated with base erosion and profit shifting. Let us move to the last topic for the day, where we are going to talk about this thing, leverage ratio. Okay, so we will understand what do we mean by leverage ratio. This is the last topic. Okay, so it was in news this year. That's why I have included it. Why it was in news? Because recently the Reserve Bank of India relaxed the leverage ratio for banks in a bid to help them expand their lending activities. Okay, recently the Reserve Bank of India has relaxed the leverage ratio for banks in a bid to help them expand their lending activities. Okay. So let us learn about leverage ratio. Okay. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, in short it is known as BCBS. Okay. Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, it is in short known as BCBS, introduced the concept of leverage ratio. Okay. Introduced the concept of leverage ratio in 2010. Basel III package of reform to indicate the level of debt incurred by banks. Banks had to publicly disclose their Basel III leverage ratio on a consolidated basis from 1st of April 2015 onwards. It was introduced in the backdrop of the global financial crisis. Okay, so the thing is, it was introduced in the backdrop of the global financial crisis, which was the result of the build-up of excessive on and off balance sheet leverage in the banking system. Then the leverage ratio as defined under Basel III norms is the tier 1 capital as a percentage of the bank's exposure. This is the definition of leverage ratio. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight it for you so that like, you don't face difficulty. So the leverage ratio as defined under Basel III norms is tier 1 capital as a percentage of the bank's exposure. Then the bank's total exposure is defined as the sum of. So if we talk about what is bank's exposure, so this is mentioned over here. The bank's total exposure is defined as the sum of the following exposures: on balance sheet exposure, derivative exposure, securities financing transaction exposures, and off balance sheet items. So these are the things that constitute the bank's exposures. Okay. Then leverage ratio is the one of the four indicators, okay, under the Reserve Bank of India's strong corrective action framework. It is a very important information because the PCA framework was also in news this year. Okay? So, like the leverage ratio is one of the four indicators that are, you know, considered under the prompt corrective action framework of the Reserve Bank of India. Okay. Recently the leverage ratio has been reduced to 4%. Okay. It has been reduced to 4% for the domestic systematically important banks and 3.5% for other banks. Okay. So this data is also important for you to remember that for domestic systematically important banks, the leverage ratio has been reduced to 4%, but for other banks, it has been reduced to a much lower percentage, 3.5%. So, moving towards synchronization with Basel III standards. A cut in the leverage ratio implies that the banks can lend more on the same capital base. If the banks has the same capital base, still it can lend more because RBI has relaxed the norm of this thing, leverage ratio. So let us see tiers of banks capital. What are the tiers of banks capital? There are three tiers of banks capital. So we will understand them one by one. Okay. So we do have tier 1 capital, we have tier 2 capital, and we have tier 3 capital. Okay. So we will quickly see these tier of capitals, and after that I'll be sharing the document with you because we hardly have 1.5 minutes to continue with the discussion today. Okay. So the last part over here that talks about Bank for International Settlements, which is in short known as BIS. Okay, BIS. And then Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. These topics may not be discussed today. Okay, so like it is part of this thing only, leverage ratio. Okay, so we are just going to discuss about these tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 capital. After then, I'll be sharing the document with you, and you can just read further. Okay. So, what is tier 1 capital? Tier 1 capital. When we talk about tier 1 capital, okay, tier 1 capital, which is the core capital, it consists of monies kept as a statutory liquidity ratio in physical cash form and as share capital, okay, and as share capital and secured loans. At least 6% of the capital adequacy ratio must come from tier 1 capital. Okay, so the thing is, norm is at least 6% of the capital adequacy ratio must come from the tier 1 capital. This capital can absorb losses without banks ceasing its trading operations. This is a very important information over here. Okay, so this is just a minute. I'll be highlighting this information for you. This capital, this tier 1 capital can absorb losses without banks ceasing its trading operations. When we talk about tier 2 capital, it is also known as supplementary capital. It includes after tax income, retail earnings of the bank, capital in the form of bonds or hybrid instruments, and unsecured loans by getting serviced. Okay, then if we talk about tier 3 capital, it includes non-performing assets, okay, subordinated loans not getting serviced, and undisclosed reserves from the balance sheet. Okay. So the thing is, these three types of capitals are very important for this year's exam also. Okay. Tier 1 capital, which is also known as core capital. This is the capital that is available with the banks. This is the most safest capital. In case a bank incurs some losses, the bank can recover from the losses using the tier 1 capital. So the thing is, this capital can absorb losses without bank ceasing its trading operations. When we talk about tier 2 capital, it is little bit more risky as compared to tier 1 capital, and tier 2 capital is also known as supplementary capital. It in, it includes after tax income, retail earnings of the banks, capital in the form of bonds, hybrid instruments, and unsecured loans, okay, which is getting serviced. Then tier 3 capital, it includes non-performing assets, subordinated loans, okay, and undisclosed reserves from the balance sheet, okay. And after that, let us talk about Bank for International Settlement, BIS. What is BIS? And then Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. These are the things. Okay, if the discussion gets terminated, no problem. I'll be sharing the document with you. Okay, so in the group where you are part of, okay, other people who did not join the group. So okay, so I think like 3 people have joined. I'll be sharing in all the group. So let us talk about Bank for International Settlements. Okay, it is an international financial institution owned by central banks. Okay, it is owned by central banks, which fosters international monetary